Welcome to the Kit Car History File series, where we'll be going through the industry's past. We'll be visiting old marks of long ago, some modern ones, some mostly older stuff. A lot of archive information with photographs and information on the cars they made, the people involved, and what happened to them. Hi, my name's Steve Holt, editor of TKC Mag and TotalKitCar.com, and welcome to the Total Kit Car YouTube channel and another episode of the Total Kit Car History Files. Welcome back if you're a regular, and if you're new around here, welcome. Just in case, don't go away, even if you weren't searching for a kit car flavoured video on your YouTube feed, and it just popped in by a random way. Stick with us; you might enjoy it. We cover the very best of the UK's near 75-year-old kit car industry here on the channel, and we feature the great, the good, the not so good, the great designers, the great cars, the notable events. It's all going to be here. We've got a wide subject matter to go at, and we're going to go at it. We also are privileged to have a superb, and the keepers of one of the very best kit car archives in the business, really. And it's I think it's a lovely way that we can get those photos out to share with interested people. So this one's an interesting one. We were going to do the subject matter of this episode. We were going to do it anyway. Some 4,000 kit car sales kind of dictates that we do that. Probably weren't going to do it quite as soon as we did. We've had several requests for us to cover the Spartan mark, which was one of the great kit car marks indeed, and the Owners Club are still around, and they're still very enthusiastic about what are superb old kit cars, really. And I mean old in the finest tradition. I mean, the mark dates back to 1973, so that's what I mean by old. And it was a time when, I guess, similar cars of a kit car nature and traditional roadster style, similar, I guess, with Gentry, and even to a certain extent JBA. They were all traditional roadsters, and they were all very, very popular at one stage. But let's look at Spartan. Let's crack straight on. Launched on April the 1st, 1973. It is on the top 10 sales list of kit cars, and it deserves to be. As it really did score big, 4,000 kit car sales, as I said. Nottingham-based company, various parts of Nottingham area. I think Pinxton was the last site that they occupied. But it was a guy called Jim McIntyre, a good old boy, Jim. He'd previously run a company in Nottingham city centre called City Bodyworks, which that kind of that wasn't a gymnasium, that was accident repair, especially crash repair stuff, particularly on Triumph TR6s and such like, before he graduated to all sports cars. So I don't know if you could specialise these days as a insurance company appointed repair shop, but he did back then. Different world, of course. And also, I do believe Jim had a career prior to that in medicine, so that was quite a sea change for him. I know he was obviously a car enthusiast, which probably led to that. 1971, he moved to a wonderful sounding place called Mapley Plains, and that's when he started the Spartan Car Company. Initially, he carried on with his accident crash repair work, and I think he kind of sort of gently introduced his first Spartan kits, which were, he described himself in a piece in a period magazine from the early 70s, Hot Car probably, as just a pile of bits designed to fit an old Herald or Vitesse chassis. Triumph is, of course. Again, they were loosely inspired. They were never classed as a replica, but I guess Jim was looking to sort of show his sort of inspiration came from an MGTF, the original one, that is, not the 90s two-seater, and also about old British cars of that period. So the original one, two-seater, aluminium panels over a tube steel frame, fiberglass wings, all mounted to the Triumph chassis. The very early ones had suicide doors, I believe. We're going to cover the various models one by one towards the end of this this inverted commas video. Original cars, I think, had Hillman Avenger bumpers, replaced soon after by Viva HA bumpers. Side lights came from an Austin A35 van. The grille, incidentally, was a Wolseley 1885 with wire mesh insert. Although they later replaced this with their own one. He came up with his own one. And I think he told me once that, well, he did tell me once, I keep saying think. He told me once that the S for the Spartan, the badge, which was on the radiator cap, shall we say, on the surround, was actually a Morris Commercial Vehicles inspired badge. 1975 Spartan kit, a complete kit, would cost you £2,365, and for that you could also have a Ford Escort Mexico 1600 engine for that. That sounds like a bit of a bargain. Initially, I think the plus two was called a family version, which added 2 extra seats and 6 inches in the doors to the car's length. I mentioned that the Escort engine choice, it was from the mid-70s that with Triumphs becoming quite sought after in their own right and becoming scarce as donors at that time, he introduced his own chassis with the Cortina donor bespoke chassis, so you didn't have to use a Triumph one. But the Ford Cortina donor option actually arrived in 1981. Most customers, I think, thereafter actually gravitated towards that donor. It was actually overall 12 inches longer and 6 inches wider than the original Triumph Herald based version, due to the larger dimensions of the Cortina, and of course people were getting bigger. It actually was quite a clever chassis. I think it was like a semi monocoque, and it had an incorporated body frame, although he still retained those aluminium panels. I do remember that Wayne Roper, now of course Europa Specialist Spares, back then came up with double Europa, and that's a very good name on his play on his word, on his name really, because double Europa, 2 words, sounds like double W of Wayne, and Roper his surname. So he had a business partner called Andy Baksh, forgive me the mispronunciation if that is the case, Baksh. And they started out, before they really got stuck into one of the leading especially spare suppliers, they were producing really high specification Spartans. And they were superb examples that Wayne and Andy built. Built a good number of them as well. I think his prices, I think it's something like £5,500, including VAT, for a turnkey car, which wasn't bad going at all, because as I say, they were well appointed. They were leather trimmed, walnut dash, and brand new engines, I seem to remember. By 1991, Jim handed over the reins to his erstwhile workshop manager, a guy called Steve Beardsall, who took over and ran that company until they pulled the shutters down for the very last time in 1995. A quiet ending, really, for a very, very notable kit car company. We'll cover the other, the specific models in a minute, but 1991, same year actually, it was Steve that launched the Trekker, which is a nice utility type little car, based on Ford Fiesta Mark II parts, I remember. Another semi-monocoque effort with tubes made from tube steel, and it had, I think, 35 separate 16 gauge aluminium panels that were initially required cutting by the customer, although after the first few, and people were finding they were wrinkling the panels, the factory did them. I think they were using heat build up from power saw while cutting them. So Spartan did the sensible thing and preformed them for them. You could also use the Mark I Fiesta, but again, that was probably becoming quite rare at that time. and the preferred engine, of course, was the CVH, I guess. Around about 40 of them were made. Now there's two other very notable arms. We'll come back to the well, let's deal with it now. Actually, the Spartan Bandit was another last throw of the dice, I guess. Another beard saw production, and it was totally out of character, shall we say, for Spartan. It was a hot rod, 27 Ford Model T, twin ladder frame, basic twin rail ladder frame chassis and Cortina suspension, as a lot of those rods at the time and still do feature. And it was a budget offering with a kit costing just $995. People claim only one was made. I've got photographs, and one of them's here. I've got photographs of three different ones, different registration plates that were definitely built, completed cars. So there were definitely three. I remember I had one guy once who took me to task because he claimed that there's no way that in the world that Spartan would produce such a car, and I was wrong. And blah blah blah. I think the photo, well, I knew I was right, but I think the photo here, so showing one outside the Spartan works, kind of proves definitively, even though even the owners club list it as on their models list. So let's now talk first about Starcraft. Now that really did make an impact. Again, it was a very popular model. Some seriously good ones built. Let's be honest, motorhomes have always been very popular in the UK, probably more popular than ever at the moment. But it was 1986 when the first Starcraft came along, out of the blue. Excuse me. It was Cortina based again, Mark III, Mark V, just like the Spartan Roadster itself. Had a very beefy ladder frame chassis to which you bolted, well, the front end of the, well, it's hard to explain really, but you used the front end of the Cortina. Later days you could use a Sierra. And it really caught people's attention. Basically gave up its centre, the Cortina gave up its centre cab section from the front bulkhead forward with the doors. The customer, you could also use the seats or leave the seats as they were if you so wished. Front suspension was standard Cortina, which incorporated all the steering and road springs. And again, the suspension at the rear was Cortina. Prop shaft and handbrake, cable and mechanism, all that was used. And there was an extra non-driven second rear axle, making 6 wheels in all, which aided stability and weight distribution, Jim said. And I think that's very true. As always, well, they were very good at GRP. Wasn't their first love, of course, because the Spartan didn't feature much of it, apart from wings, etc., and a few other bits. But the panels were really good quality fiberglass, very sturdy fiberglass. Always came in white gel coat, so a lot of the customers, because obviously caravans, motorhomes, the white is the colour really. But the customer could paint them or use fixed graphics if they so wished. The kit included, you got a set of front wings, door skins, the motorhome section, the shell of that, and the aluminium frames and window glass, and 6 wheels and tyres, usually Wellers, I think, from memory. Kits cost just shy of £5 short of £2,000 in 1986 on launch, and it included everything bar the donor vehicle parts and the motorhome furniture. Because don't forget, if you want to use a motorhome, you've got to go and buy some specific. A lot of people used the proper kit car philosophy and built their own, but there are companies out there that will sell you specially sized and built fridges and wardrobes and goodness knows what else for motorhomes and caravans, and so you could go and do that. You could do what you wanted, really, of course. Beardsall was really looking after Starcraft before he actually took over the whole kit and caboodle from launch, but he reckoned a decent DIY Starcraft could be completed for around £3,000 plus the cost of a donor vehicle. And I'm not sure if that was true, but it certainly seems feasible to me. But it did catch the imagination of over 200 people, which isn't bad going, really. I think that's a fair kind of estimate on sales. You've got a useful 6 foot of headroom in the camper section, and that's with a total height of 7'5". So that means it's more than usable in most conditions where, you know, caravan might be too high to get into certain places, because I think caravans are typically 9 foot high. So the bed's folded to give you extra seating, and you could carry passengers in the back of it on the move. TMR, I think, I don't know if they were part of Spartan, but they were certainly Spartan's transport company. Now, that was interesting. They would deliver your Starcraft kit for free anywhere in the UK. Now, that was quite an undertaking, but that's a service that they offered, at least for a time. Now, I've got a good Starcraft story, personal story of that. Back in the 80s, regular readers will know I worked for Kit Cars and Specials magazine, and we used to sponsor the Kit Car Action Days, which were mainly known for being at Castle Combe, but we did have a couple at Mallory Park and at least one at Knock Hill. And 1986 Mallory Park event, I think it took place in July, I think, from memory. The editor, I think, Peter Cox said at the time, and we thought it'd be a great idea if we nabbed a Starcraft for the weekend, so we could use it, or for a week actually before, and we could go and visit a couple of kit car manufacturers, ending up at Mallory Park in Leicestershire, and we would camp in it for the weekend. So that was a good idea. I do remember we had great fun in that car. It wasn't particularly fast. It had a 1600 Ford, could have been a Crossroad, probably a CVH in it. Wasn't particularly fast, I say. Took us about 3 days to work out that we had to be careful getting out of the car because of the overhang of the motorhome section. I bumped the back of my head, bashed it in fact, about 16 times, and Pete a couple of times, maybe less or more. But once we got used to that, it was fine. And it was really, really good thing. It was comfortable. There was a funny story actually. We were we met up with some of the other people from Link House who were going to be our actor staff on our stand at Mallory for the weekend. We met up with them, I think, on the M1 somewhere, and we travelled in sort of convoy to Leicestershire. And I remember quite vividly, I think we were taking it in turns, Pete and I driving, and it was my go behind the wheel, I think, for the last leg to the circuit. And my publisher at the time, he's a very good friend indeed to this day, Alan Morgan. In fact, he runs Club Lotus. He had a company 2 litre S Capri Mark III, which he he was very proud of. And I always remember he fancied himself as you know, he had no way could I overtake him in the Starcraft, was his kind of belief. And I remember Pete and I had to do it. I was a young lad at the time, relatively speaking, and I think it was the Braunston roundabout in the middle of Leicester, and Alan left me a gap up the inside, so I outbraked him in the Starcraft and got round the roundabout before he did, basically. And I always remember dear old Pete in the passenger seat basically saying, "Oh my God, Hull, what have you done?" Or words to that effect. As we heard, all I could hear was wardrobe doors banging and crashing. I think the pots and pans were flying all over the motorhome section. But it was a good laugh. I guess you had to be there, but it was quite funny, and it's something that Alan and I often still talk about. I still don't quite believe I did it, but hey, we've all done silly things in our youth, I guess, when it comes to automotives, cars. But anyway, that's another story. So that's the Starcraft. Then we have another notable model called the Sherwood. Now, the Sherwood was one where we had a phase in the industry for utility type cars, but more rugged ones, more pickup type. Before the days when you could go and buy a Nissan Navara or a Ford Ranger in the UK. So there was the Sherwood, there was Carlton Commando, there was all sorts of stuff. Of course, the NTF Diamond. Tim Dutton was at it with a couple of his models, and they were all good sellers. And 110 Sherwoods were produced from 1984. Again, was based on Cortina Mark 3 to 5. You could use pretty much what you use with the Starcraft, albeit there was no motorhome section, of course. And it was a rugged old beast. It really was a very good thing. Apparently the build was quite tricky. I spoke to a couple of people over the years that said that the Sherwood build was not for the faint of heart, or indeed the novice. And there was 14 separate GRP body panels that needed a bit of work, I'm told. And that's probably why I always remember, I know, late 80s, 90s, there was a spate of unfinished Sherwood projects for sale, and I guess that's why. But it was a good thing. I mean, I've driven a couple of those, or I drove a couple of those over the years, so that was good. And it was a child of its time. Nowadays, I don't think you'd really be doing, or you wouldn't be looking at much volume with such a vehicle. But it kind of followed. The Commando was first. The Commando came out a year before it, and that sold over 400. Now there's a good bit of subject matter for this series. Carlton Automotive. There's another company of its time who did pretty well in terms of sales terms. So I think we'll look at Carlton Automotive. They got a good story to tell. Sold a good number of kits, not as many as Spartan. Not many did. And that's kind of where we're at. I think we'll probably leave it there. I think there's no reason. We've put some nice photos here of some a variety of Spartans in Roadster, and +2 form, Ford and Triumph. We've also put some what do you call it? Trekkers, Bandits, Sherwood, Starcraft, to give you a flavour of what the company were actually doing. I suppose they're a company, even though they sold over 4,000 Spartans, they don't really, it's almost like they didn't exist. It's strange. Of course, the owners club are great, but outside sort of generally, if anyone's come along in the last 25 years in the industry, they'd be forgiven really for not knowing what a Spartan was, which is a shame because it was a superb thing. It obviously scratched an itch for 4,000 people, and so that makes it an all-time great kit car in sales terms. There aren't many that sold 4,000. A single model sold 4,000. Tim Dutton obviously sold over 8,500 cars, but various models. Robin Hood, Richard sold probably 10,000. Most of those were of a Lotus 7 inspired nature, but there were others, so it wasn't just one particular model. Westfield sold various cars. So in many ways, it could be said that Spartan is right up there in the very, very top echelons of the industry's sales charts. But that wraps up the Spartan organisation. If you've enjoyed this video and you got this far, please subscribe and like. It helps us out greatly. Also, if you haven't done so already, if you could go over to Enwin Motors channel, run by our video editor Neil Winnington. We do have a cross section there of various videos that we both run, but there are some exclusive to Neil videos and vice versa. So again, it's worthwhile, very much worthwhile looking at both channels. We've got lots of plans for the channel, so please stick with us. And if you've got any suggestions for subject matter, we've got a long list ourselves, obviously, but if you've got any suggestions that you really think we should look at or tell the story of, if we can do it, we will. Wherever you are in the world, whatever time of day this is, I hope you're having a great one, and thank you so much for visiting. It's much appreciated, and I look forward to welcoming you here again next time. Thank you very much.